What if a child never smiled? For many years. No words. No laughter. Just silence, and a father slowly breaking under the weight of it. He's tried everything. Nothing works. Until one quiet afternoon. In a place he never meant to visit. Someone speaks to his daughter. Anne for the first time in years. She smiles. But who is this woman? And why did she succeed when the world couldn't? Don't look away. Sometimes, the quietest hearts carry the loudest stories. The rain had just started when Knox pulled the car into a narrow gravel lot behind a diner that looked like it belonged to a different decade. A faded sign buzzed faintly in the window, the Clover Spoon. It wasn't the kind of place a billionaire would ever set foot in, much less with his fragile daughter in tow. But today wasn't about status. It was about desperation. He turned off the engine and sat there for a long second, the wipers still swiping away the drizzle, as if trying to hold time in place. "We're just going to try, sweetheart. That's all," he murmured. Lily didn't respond. She sat silently in her wheelchair, her small hands curled in her lap, her gaze fixed on something, or nothing, outside the window. At 5 years old, she was ghostly still, like a porcelain doll left too long on a forgotten shelf. Her golden curls framed a face void of expression. Her father had almost forgotten what her laughter sounded like. Or if she'd ever truly laughed at all. He took a breath, stepped out, and circled around to gently lift her into his arms. The rain kissed the edges of his coat, and he didn't care. He just wanted her to feel something. Anything. Inside the diner, warmth and the smell of butter and brewed coffee wrapped around them like an old memory. The place was quiet. A couple in the corner whispered over pancakes. A lone trucker scrolled through his phone near the window. Nothing special. Then she appeared. The waitress. She looked no older than her late 20s, wearing a faded green apron and a loose ponytail that threatened to fall apart at any second. Her eyes, tired, maybe, but soft. Watching. Taking in everything without judgment. She approached with a notepad in hand, but her attention wasn't on Knox. It was on Lily. "Hi there," she said softly, crouching just slightly to Lily's level before even greeting the man holding her. "You look like you've had a big day." Lily didn't move. Didn't blink. Knox adjusted in his seat across from the empty high chair, his voice low and businesslike. "Coffee. Black. And tomato soup for her. Please." The waitress, Ivy, nodded, but her eyes lingered just a second longer on the little girl's motionless form. "Coming right up," she said, turning away. Knox exhaled as she walked back to the kitchen. He didn't expect miracles. He barely expected Lily to taste the soup. But he had to try something. Anything. Because the silence in their house was starting to echo. And something in the warmth of that waitress's gaze, just something, felt like maybe today would be different. Steam curled up from the bowl of tomato soup as Ivy placed it gently in front of Lily, along with a small spoon and a folded napkin. She didn't say anything at first. She just smiled, a quiet, patient kind of smile, as she set the black coffee in front of Knox. "Thanks," he muttered, then leaned in toward Lily. "All right, sweetie. Just a little. Try a bite for me, okay?" He scooped a small spoonful and held it toward her. His hands were steady. His voice soft. Rehearsed. But Lily didn't even glance at the spoon. Instead, she turned her face slightly away, her eyes fixed on the condensation trickling down the window. Knox tried again. "It's warm. Just one bite. Nothing." He reached forward, gently touching her hand, just a nudge, and brought the spoon closer to her lips. That's when she reacted. She lifted her arm, and, with sudden defiance, struck the spoon from his hand. The soup splattered across the table, dripping onto her tray, staining the napkin red like a quiet explosion. The spoon clattered to the floor. Knox's jaw tightened, but he didn't raise his voice. He just sat back and closed his eyes for a beat. "Goddamn," he whispered under his breath. From across the diner, Ivy had watched everything. Now she stepped forward, hesitant, but calm. Her voice was careful, like someone approaching a wounded animal. "Mind if I try?" she asked. Knox looked up, surprised. I don't think she." "Just once," Ivy said gently. "If it doesn't work, I'll walk away." He hesitated, then gave a small nod, wiping the table with a napkin as she stepped to Lily's side. Ivy crouched down, resting on her heels so she was eye level with the little girl. "Hey there," she said softly, her voice warm but never forced. "You don't know me. That's okay. I'm just the lady with the soup." Lily didn't respond. Her eyes flicked toward Ivy for the briefest second, just a flicker, and then away. Ivy didn't push. Instead, she picked up the fallen spoon, walked back to the counter, washed it thoroughly, then returned with a clean one and sat slowly at the edge of their booth. "You know, when I was little, my baby brother couldn't talk either," she began. "He didn't like food much. Not unless someone told him a story." Knox's brows drew together. Lily, though still, wasn't as tense anymore. Ivy stirred the soup gently, letting the scent rise between them. "I used to tell him soup was like a warm hug," she said, dipping the spoon. "Like when the world's too loud or too cold, soup sneaks in and whispers, 'You're safe now.'" She held the spoon out. Not pushing. Just offering. "Do you want a little hug?" Silence stretched between them. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, Lily turned her head. She looked directly at Ivy. Knox sat forward, barely breathing. Lily's hand moved. Just slightly. And then she reached out. Ivy placed the spoon in her small fingers, guiding it gently. Lily lifted it to her mouth. A tiny sip. Just one. The spoon lowered. And then, a tremor at the corner of her lips. Like a ripple across still water. Her cheeks rose ever so slightly. And then, impossibly, stunningly, Lily smiled. Not a big one. Not a loud one. But it was there. Real. Alive. Knox's eyes welled up, his hand frozen mid-air. He whispered, "Oh my God." Ivy didn't say anything. She just smiled back, softly, knowingly, and whispered to Lily like it was a secret. "Told you. Hugs always help." The smile lingered on Lily's face for only a few seconds, but to Knox, it felt like eternity. He couldn't take his eyes off her, afraid that if he blinked, it might vanish. Like a mirage. She had smiled. For the first time in 5 years. He looked over at Ivy. She wasn't triumphant or surprised. If anything, there was something almost sorrowful in her eyes. Like she had touched this kind of brokenness before. They left the diner in silence. Lily resting in his arms, her head leaning slightly, willingly, against his chest. That alone was a miracle. But Knox couldn't stop thinking about the woman with the tired smile and warm voice. She had done in minutes what experts, therapists, and specialists couldn't do in years. He needed to understand how. That night, after Lily had fallen asleep curled up with her stuffed bear, her spoon still resting on the tray beside her, Knox sat in his home office, sleeves rolled up, laptop glowing against the darkness. He typed in her name from the receipt, Ivy Quinn. And there she was. Valedictorian of her high school. Full scholarship to Stanford, majoring in special education. Countless awards, internships, glowing professor reviews. And then nothing. A drop-off. No graduation. No job placement. Just silence. Until 2 years ago, when she started working odd jobs. Cafes. Diners. Always in small towns. Always short stints. He dug deeper. A local article. A short obituary. Caleb Quinn, 11, passed away in his sleep due to complications from cerebral palsy. Survived by his sister, Ivy Quinn. Knox stared at the screen, his heart sinking. That's what she saw in Lily. That's why she understood. The next day, he returned to the Clover Spoon. She was restocking sugar packets behind the counter when the door jingled. Her eyes met his instantly. Guarded. No smile this time. He walked straight to her. Can we talk? About what? About my daughter, he said. And about how you did something no one else could. Ivy let out a slow breath, leaning against the counter. She smiled. That doesn't mean it's going to stick. It's more than anyone's gotten in years, he said. Please. Come work with her. I'll pay whatever you want. She shook her head before he even finished. It's not about money. Then what is it? Ivy paused. Her voice was quieter now. I used to believe I could fix things. Kids. Families. My brother. She looked away, jaw tightening. But I couldn't. And after he died, I stopped pretending I could. Knox's voice softened. This isn't about fixing her. It's about reaching her. You already did. One smile doesn't change the fact that I don't belong in that world anymore. There was silence between them. Heavy and real. Then Knox stepped closer, something breaking open in his voice. You saw her. You really saw her. Not the wheelchair, not the diagnosis. Just Lily. I don't know how to do that. Ivy's eyes glistened. For a moment, she looked like she might cry. But instead, she whispered, I can't go through that kind of heartbreak again. She turned away, grabbed a towel, and started wiping the counter even though it was already clean. Knox stood there for a long second. Then nodded. Okay. He left the diner without looking back. But as the bell above the door jingled once more, Ivy stopped wiping. And for the first time in years, her hands were trembling. 3 days passed. Ivy didn't sleep much. She kept replaying it in her head, the look in Lily's eyes, the way her tiny fingers had reached for that spoon, the almost smile that broke something open inside her. And Knox's voice, quiet but resolute, you saw her. She tried to forget. She couldn't. On the 4th day, she found herself standing outside the gates of a sprawling estate in Pacific Heights. Her knuckles white around the strap of her canvas bag. Her breath stuck somewhere between her chest and her throat. She pressed the intercom. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. It's Ivy Quinn. You said 1 week. The doors opened with a soft click, revealing polished floors that reflected light like glass. Every corner of the house screamed wealth, artwork, marble, silence too sharp to be comforting. Ivy stepped in slowly, feeling like her scuffed sneakers didn't belong on the floor. But then Lily appeared at the top of the stairs, held in the arms of a caretaker, and all the noise in Ivy's head quieted. She's why I'm here. Knox walked in from another room, still in a crisp button-down, sleeves rolled up. He looked tired. But not cold. Thank you for coming, he said, voice low. We'll try 1 week. No pressure. If it's too much, I'll stay the full week, Ivy said quickly. No walking out in the middle. He nodded. They didn't shake hands. There was too much weight between them for something that simple. The first 2 days were brutal. Lily refused to look at her. She turned away during story time. She ignored the soft music Ivy played. Even the soup, their old bond, was left untouched. Ivy's self-doubt clawed its way back. Late one night, as she sat curled on the edge of the guest bed, she whispered into the silence, "I shouldn't have come. I'm not her sister. I'm not anyone." But then came the third day. And a book with a cracked spine. She had found it in the nursery, an old picture book with textured pages. She placed it gently on Lily's tray and began to read, not expecting anything. Once upon a time, there was a little fox who didn't like to speak. She read slowly, softly. Halfway through the story, she saw it, Lily's fingers brushing the edge of the page. Deliberate. Curious. Ivy smiled, her voice trembling just slightly. He didn't use words, but he had a heart so big, it spoke louder than anyone else's. Lily turned the next page herself. By the 5th day, they had music. Ivy brought in a small speaker, played a lullaby she used to hum to Caleb. She didn't expect Lily to react. But the little girl tapped her fingers gently on the tray, off rhythm, uncertain, but she was listening. "You like that?" Ivy asked softly, kneeling beside her. Lily didn't smile. But she hummed. A small, broken sound. Barely audible. But Ivy heard it. And that night, she wept alone in the guest room, not out of grief this time, but from a hope she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. By day 6, Knox had started joining them during sessions. He stayed quiet at first, standing in the background with his arms crossed, watching. But Ivy noticed the shift, the way he softened when Lily reached for the book without prompting. The way his expression cracked when she turned to Ivy during a song, her eyes holding a flicker of something new. Connection. On the 7th night, they sat together in the sunroom, Knox, Ivy, and Lily curled up in her wheelchair with a blanket over her legs. Soft jazz filled the background. Outside, the world faded into dusk. "You know," Knox said suddenly, his voice almost a whisper, "I used to believe I could fix everything with enough money." Ivy looked at him. He wasn't looking at her, he was looking at Lily. "But I never realized. She didn't need fixing." Ivy swallowed hard. "No," she said quietly. "She just needed to be heard." Lily made a soft cooing noise between them. And for a moment, it felt like maybe, just maybe, this wasn't a house full of ghosts anymore. It was the start of something else. There was no exact moment Knox changed. It didn't happen all at once. There was no grand epiphany, no emotional speech in the rain. It started with a puzzle piece. One afternoon, Ivy laid out a simple wooden puzzle on the coffee table. Lily was curled under her soft blanket, watching with those quiet, curious eyes. Knox had just walked in from a meeting, phone still in his hand, suit jacket slung over one shoulder. He paused when he saw them. Normally, he would have nodded politely, retreated to his office. But this time, he hesitated. "Can I?" he asked, nodding toward the puzzle. Ivy looked up. A little surprised. "Sure." He sat on the floor beside Lily's chair, loosened his tie. Picked up a corner piece and held it between his fingers like it might break. "I haven't done one of these since I was a kid." Ivy smiled. "Then you'll be terrible at it." "That's half the fun." Lily looked at him. And for the first time, Knox noticed, not just the way her eyes followed the puzzle, but the way they flicked toward him. Waiting. He offered her a piece. She didn't take it. But she didn't look away either. That was enough. After that, it became a rhythm. Small things. He started waking up earlier, joining them for breakfast even when he barely touched his coffee. He watched Ivy's hands as she worked with Lily, learning. He started mimicking her tone, her pace. Not perfectly, but with effort. One morning, Ivy found him in the library, on the floor, beside Lily, reading The Little Prince out loud in a voice that was rough, unsure, but trying. She didn't interrupt. She just stood at the doorway, one hand to her mouth, her heart breaking in the best way. At first, Lily barely reacted. But then came the moment with the crayons. Knox had pulled out a coloring book, one with animals and bright lines, and laid it out in front of her. He looked ridiculous, legs folded awkwardly in slacks, red crayon in one hand like a caveman discovering tools. "Okay, how about this guy?" he asked, pointing at a tiger. "Red tiger. Why not? Who needs zoology, right?" Lily giggled. A short, breathy sound. Ivy looked up from the kitchen and froze. Knox looked stunned, as if someone had just lit a match in a dark room. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. Ivy nodded slowly. "You made her laugh." He looked back at Lily, who was now carefully coloring outside the lines with deliberate little strokes. "I didn't even know what her laugh sounded like." His voice broke, just slightly. Each day, the walls between them cracked a little more. They started eating meals together, not just in the same room, but together. Ivy noticed Knox had stopped checking his phone during lunch. He started remembering things, Lily's favorite song, how she liked her toast cut. One evening, they danced. Well, Ivy danced, with Lily in her arms, spinning gently to a soft jazz tune echoing from the sunroom speakers. Knox stood by, awkward at first, watching. Then, with a deep breath, he stepped forward and held out his hand. "May I?" Ivy blinked. "You want to learn," he said. From the expert. They danced slowly, clumsily at first, then with a rhythm only people healing together can find. Lily giggled again, head on Ivy's shoulder, one arm stretched to touch her father's tie. It was messy. Imperfect. But it was real. And somewhere in between the music, the crayons, and the puzzle pieces, something changed in Ivy, too. The house didn't feel cold anymore. It felt like something was growing there. Something fragile, warm. Home. The sun dipped low behind the trees, casting long shadows across the marble floors of the estate. The air was still, soaked in golden light. Ivy had just finished reading Lily's favorite story, The Fox Who Stayed, and now the little girl was asleep, curled beneath her knitted blanket on the sunroom couch. Soft music played in the background, barely above a whisper. The moment was fragile. Like glass. Knox stood in the doorway, watching them. His sleeves were rolled up, tie forgotten somewhere in the library. There was something in his eyes, gentler now, more vulnerable than Ivy had ever seen before. She looked up, sensing him. "She didn't cry once today," she said softly, brushing a curl from Lily's forehead. "I know," Knox replied. That's all you." Ivy smiled, faintly. "It's not just me. It's you, too. She sees you now." Knox stepped closer, speaking more quietly. "No. She trusts you. That's something I never knew how to earn." Their eyes met. And for the first time, there was no pain in the silence between them, only warmth. Shared stillness. The kind that doesn't ask for words. Ivy stood up slowly, careful not to wake Lily. Knox didn't step back. He whispered, "I never thought this house would feel alive again." "Neither did I," Ivy murmured. Her voice shook just a little. But she's waking up. In her own way. Knox reached up, gently brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. You woke us both up, Ivy. She froze. And then. His hand slipped to her jaw, thumb resting against her cheek. He leaned in. Slow. Careful. Like asking a question without words. And when their lips met, it was soft. Barely more than a breath. But it held everything they hadn't said. The pain. The gratitude. The ache of two people who had lost too much, too young. It lasted only a few seconds. But when Knox pulled back, Ivy's eyes were wide. Too wide. Her breath hitched. She stepped back like she'd touched fire. Knox. I can't. Ivy. I can't. Her voice was sharper now. Trembling. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have, this was never. She backed away, hands slightly raised, as if warding off a ghost. Knox looked stunned. Hurt flashing in his eyes, but he said nothing. Ivy turned and walked quickly down the hall, her footsteps echoing. The next morning, she stood outside his office door, holding a manila envelope. Knox looked up from his desk when she entered. His eyes were tired. Guarded. Ivy didn't sit. She placed the envelope in front of him. I'm resigning. A beat of silence. Ivy, don't do this. I have to. Because of last night. She looked at him, really looked. Because I can't lose anyone else. I can't be part of something that might fall apart again. I barely survived the last time. Knox stood, slowly. His voice low, careful. You're not going to lose us. You can't promise that. Her voice cracked. No one can. I loved my brother so hard it hollowed me out when he died. And if I stay, if Lily. She couldn't finish. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. This was supposed to be 1 week. And I let it become more. That was my mistake. Knox stepped around the desk, but she took a step back. He stopped. I won't fight you if you need to go, he said quietly. But don't think for a second that what you've done here was a mistake. Ivy swallowed. Her fingers clenched. She turned away without another word. As the door closed behind her, the silence in the room felt different now. Heavier. Emptier. Like Lily's smile had walked out with her. Ivy was gone. Just like that. The rooms felt different now, colder, somehow. Quieter in the wrong way. Not the comforting quiet of bedtime stories or soft music, but a stillness that pressed on the walls like fog. Lily noticed first. That morning, she sat in her wheelchair at the breakfast table, tray in front of her, untouched. Knox had tried. Oatmeal. Toast cut into stars the way Ivy did. He even played the lullaby from Ivy's playlist on the Bluetooth speaker. Lily didn't move. She just stared at the spoon. Her eyes were empty again. Like someone had drawn the curtain shut from the inside. 3 days passed. She didn't smile. Didn't hum. Didn't reach for her books. By the 4th day, she stopped eating altogether. Knox brought in another therapist. Then 2. A rotating team of professionals with degrees and pleasant voices. They tried songs, puppets, sensory therapy. Nothing worked. The moment they entered the room, Lily would retreat inward, her eyes glazing over. She wouldn't touch a crayon. Wouldn't even look out the window. She was folding back into herself. As if everything that had bloomed in her was being swallowed whole by the silence again. Knox tried not to panic. But he was unraveling. Late one night, he sat alone in the nursery, his elbows on his knees, hair disheveled. The soft nightlight cast shadows on the floor, where Lily's favorite puzzle lay half finished. His voice cracked as he whispered into the stillness. "I don't know what to do without you, Ivy." His phone sat next to him. He had typed her number in twice. Deleted it both times. She had been gone for exactly 10 days. On the 11th day, the housekeeper, Miriam, found Knox sitting on the stairs outside Lily's room, eyes red, clothes wrinkled, mug of untouched coffee beside him. "She won't let me in," he said, without lifting his head. "She won't even look at me." Miriam crouched beside him, her voice gentle but firm. "Because the one person who saw her heart walked away. You can't fill that space with money, sir." Knox clenched his jaw. His voice was hoarse. "I tried. God, I tried. I thought if I kept everything controlled. If I didn't feel too much, nothing could hurt her again." Miriam reached out, placed a hand on his shoulder. "But children don't need perfection. They need presence. And love. Real love." The storm rolled in without warning. Rain slapped against the windows of the mansion in waves, wind howling like something feral outside. Inside, the house was dimly lit, shadows stretching across the walls like long, reaching hands. Knox had just closed his laptop, another email from another therapist he didn't believe in, when he heard it. A small voice from down the hall. "Fragile. Barely more than air. Daddy." He rushed to Lily's room. She was sitting up, legs tucked beneath her blanket, her teddy bear in one arm, the other hand gripping the edge of her pillow. Her lips quivered slightly, but her eyes were clear. "Present. Daddy," she said again, a little louder this time, "where's Ivy?" The words cut through him like glass. Not because of the question, but because it came from her. His daughter. Who hadn't asked for anything, not food, not attention, not love, in months. And the only name she wanted was Ivy's. Knox dropped to his knees beside her, voice choked. "Sweetheart. Do you miss her?" Lily nodded, slow and certain. Tears blurred his vision. She didn't ask for a nurse. Or a doctor. Or a new toy. She asked for the woman who gave her back her voice. That's when it hit him. Ivy wasn't just the one who had helped Lily speak. She was the reason Lily wanted to speak. She wasn't an employee. She was family. Minutes later, Knox had wrapped Lily in a warm blanket, cradled her against his chest, and carried her out into the rain. He didn't think about what people would say. Didn't think about the hour, or the weather, or the risks. He only knew one thing. He had to bring her home. The diner was nearly empty. The Clover Spoon sat under flickering streetlights, rain pounding on the rooftop like 1,000 tiny fists. Inside, the lights were dimmed, and only one booth was occupied. A woman in a grey hoodie sat, with a cup of tea in her hands, staring blankly out the window. "Ivy." Knox pushed the door open. The bell jingled, sharp and loud in the quiet. She turned, slowly. Her eyes met his, and then dropped to Lily in his arms. She stood immediately. "Is she okay?" She breathed, rushing forward. Knox nodded, lips trembling. "She asked for you." Ivy's eyes filled. She looked at Lily, her expression still soft, still uncertain. Lily looked back at her. There was no fear in her eyes. No confusion. Only need. And then Ivy couldn't move. She knelt there, frozen, staring at Lily's outstretched hand, the small, trembling fingers reaching for her as if they'd never stopped waiting. Lily's touch landed softly on her cheek. Warm. Real. Present. And something inside Ivy shattered. Tears slipped down her face before she could stop them. She didn't care that they were in the middle of a diner, that her shift had ended an hour ago, or that she hadn't slept properly in days. All she saw, all she felt, was the little girl who had changed her life without saying a single word. "I thought I broke you," Ivy whispered, her voice shaking. "I thought walking away would undo everything." Lily didn't speak. But she didn't need to. Her tiny arms reached forward, and without a second thought, Ivy scooped her up into her arms, tucking her close, holding her like something too precious to ever lose again. They stayed like that. No explanations. No apologies. Just the sound of quiet sobs against her shoulder, and the way Lily's fingers clung to the back of her shirt, like she might disappear again, if she let go. "I'm here," Ivy whispered again and again, rocking gently. "I'm here, sweet girl. I'm not going anywhere." Knox stood a few feet back, watching them, his throat tight, hands clenched at his sides. He had never felt more helpless. Or more sure of what he wanted. He took a step forward, his voice low, cracked with emotion. "You don't have to come back for the job." Ivy looked up, still holding Lily. Her eyes were red, her lips trembling. "Then why did you bring me here?" Knox met her gaze, steady this time. "Because I need you." Silence. He stepped closer. Every word deliberate. Not as Lily's caregiver. Not as a therapist. Not even as someone who knows what buttons to press to make my daughter smile. He paused. The words came slower now, heavier. "I need you. Because when you walked out, this house turned back into a tomb. Because she stopped laughing, and I stopped breathing, and everything we'd built just." He ran a hand through his hair, swallowed hard. "Ivy, I need you not just for Lily. I need you. For me." She stared at him. Unmoving. And for a second, he thought she might run again. But then, she looked down at Lily, nestled in her arms. Then back at him. And she said, quietly, "I'm scared." Knox took another step, voice softer. "So am I." Ivy's eyes brimmed again. "What if it falls apart?" "Then we build it again," Knox said. "Together." Lily shifted slightly in Ivy's arms, turning her head, one hand still gently clinging to her shoulder. Ivy took a breath that sounded like it had been waiting years to be exhaled. And then she nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay. I'll come home." Knox stepped forward, wrapping his arms around both of them, and for the first time, ever, it didn't feel fragile. It felt like something unbreakable was being born. The late afternoon light poured into the kitchen like honey, soft, golden, and impossibly warm. The scent of homemade tomato soup floated in the air. Not store-bought. Not from a diner. This time, Ivy had made it herself, carefully stirring in everything she remembered from that very first day, a little garlic, a dash of cream, and the softest, most comforting warmth she could offer. Lily sat in her usual spot at the table, wrapped in her favorite blanket. Her cheeks were rosier these days, her eyes brighter. Knox sat beside her, resting a hand lightly on the table, watching her with quiet reverence. Ivy knelt in front of them, placing the small bowl in front of Lily, steam curling toward the ceiling. "Ready to try?" she asked gently, her voice barely above a whisper. Lily looked at the bowl. Then at Ivy. And then, without a word, she reached for the spoon. Her fingers trembled slightly, as she wrapped them around the handle. Knox leaned in, breath caught in his chest. Ivy didn't move. She couldn't. Lily dipped the spoon into the soup. Lifted it slowly. Carefully. Brought it to her lips. Anne took a bite. The room held its breath. Then she smiled. She said softly. Warm hug. Tears burst from Ivy's eyes before she could stop them. Knox made a soft choking sound, covering his mouth with his hand. Then he reached for Lily, kissing her temple again and again. You did it, Ivy whispered. You really did it. Lily giggled, as if the world had never been dark. And then she reached her hand across the table toward Knox's. Daddy, I love you. He froze. Looked at her. I love you too, baby. He looked at Ivy, eyes glassy. Something shifted in his chest. Now. It had to be now. He stood slowly, walked around the table, and dropped to one knee right beside Ivy. She blinked. Knox? He pulled something from his pocket, a simple ring, elegant and real, not showy. Just true. His voice was unsteady. His eyes locked on hers. I don't have a speech. Just this. You walked into our lives and gave us a reason to hope again. You brought my daughter back to me. You brought me back to me. And I don't want to spend another day, another second, without you. He held the ring up. Ivy Quinn. Will you marry me? Tears streamed freely down her face. She covered her mouth, shaking with emotion. Then she laughed, soft and broken, and nodded through the tears. Yes, she choked out. Yes. 1,000 times, yes. Knox stood, and she threw her arms around him, laughing and crying all at once. Lily clapped her hands, giggling, yay, yay. As if she knew exactly what had happened. And in that kitchen, warm with soup and sunlight and second chances, 3 broken hearts became whole again. That night, under a sky full of stars, they sat on the porch together. Lily between them, curled into Ivy's arms, Knox's hand resting over both of theirs. They didn't say much. They didn't have to. Because this was home. Not the house. Not the name. Each other. Love isn't flawless. It doesn't arrive wrapped in certainty, or promised to fix all the broken things. It comes quietly, on rainy nights, in cracked voices, through shared laughter and spoonfuls of soup. It shows up not as rescue, but as presence. Not perfection, but choice. Because true love is choosing to stay. Even when it hurts. Even when fear screams louder than hope. Even when your hands are shaking, and your heart still remembers what it was like to break. It's choosing to hold on. To the child who forgot how to smile. To the woman who swore she'd never love again. To the man who thought money could protect him from loss, until love proved it was the only thing that ever could. This isn't a story about fixing what's broken. It's about building something new, from the cracks. It's about finding home not in a place, but in people. People who choose each other. Over and over again.